Everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Kristen and you are in Mama's Book Nook. For today's video, I wanted to share with you guys my top 10 books for 2022 before we head on into 2023. And I have a lot of anticipated reads for 2023, but I really loved these books that I'm about to share with you in 2022. So go ahead and grab something fun and cozy, and then let's go ahead and get started. Hello everybody, I'm so glad you're here. I had a really great reading year, and I'm not even really done yet. I'm still working on 2 books that I am hoping will be finished by the end of the year. I'm still working on 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, and I'm working through Fairy Tale by Stephen King. If I get Fairy Tale done before the end of the year, I will probably let you all know that I'm adding that to probably a top read of the year as well. I have so far read 110 books in 2022, and for me that's extremely impressive because I went a really long time without reading as much, maybe 1 or 2 books a year if I was lucky. I got really involved in other things in high school, and then as an undergrad in college I was really busy all the time, and then I went straight into graduate work, and then I had a kid, and so reading, it wasn't able to be a top priority. And so in 2021 in July, I found the Zodiac Academy series and I breezed my way through what was already available of that, and then I found the ACOTAR series and I breezed my way through what was available of that. I've just not stopped. And so 110 books in 1 year, possibly 112 if I could get 6 of Crows and Fairy Tale knocked out. And that's a lot of books for me, and I'm actually really proud of myself, not to toot my own horn. So let's go ahead and get into the books that I have listed as my top for the year. They are in no particular order, and actually there are a couple that is the series / duology because I couldn't pick just one or the other, so I went ahead and picked them both. But yeah, I have some physical copies of the books that I'm going to share with you, and then I'll put the other ones on the screen because I either got them from the library, they're on my Kindle, or someone is borrowing them. So yes, let's go ahead and get started. One of them for this year is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This book is so magical, it is so whimsical, it is so cute, it is so charming. I fell in love with every single character. I didn't think a single character had a flaw. It just was wonderful. And so you're following Linus, who is a caseworker in the department in charge of magical youth. And so his job is to go to different orphanages that have special children, and check on their living status, their living situation, make sure they're doing okay. If there's a complaint, he has to investigate it to decide whether or not the child is moving to a different orphanage. So he is tasked with going to an orphanage in the Cerulean Sea where he meets Arthur, who is the caregiver for a group of extremely different children, and it's believed that one of them is going to bring about the end of the world. And so he has to go investigate it and decide whether or not the orphanage even has to stay open. But there's a lot of underlying story there. There's a lot of backstory there. There's reasons that the department in charge of magical youth is investigating Arthur. And so it's very cute. It's very good. And it's gotta be on the top of the list. But like I said, I couldn't really rank them. I didn't know where to even begin to do that. It's a winner. Next one is one you've heard me brag about, and I loved every second of it, and I read it for Christmas, and that's A Very Merry Bromance by Lyssa K. Adams. This book was so wonderful and hysterical, and their relationship was amazing, and there's this underlying story with politics and with believing in people outside of who they are. She's an immigration lawyer, and so she sees a lot of the rough stuff that's going on to immigrants in the United States right now. It was really interesting to read. There's socioeconomic status stuff, there's all kinds of stuff, and there's also a found family. Even though Gretchen is well aware and knows everybody that's part of this bromance book club and is friends with the girlfriends and the wives. She's never really fit in. So there's just this part that she's welcomed into the group, and not even necessarily because of Colton, but because of who she is. Bless you. And yes, part of that is Colton and her relationship with him, but it's a found family for her because her family's a bunch of, well, a-holes, if you ask me. There's the grumpy sunshine trope, where he's the sunshine and she's the grump. There's the I hate Christmas, I love Christmas trope. It's really, really good, and I really loved it, and it was really hard to really follow anything after that. Like, any book that followed this one, I felt bad for. Let's be honest. I really loved this book, and I highly suggest picking it up. I hadn't read any of the other bromance books. I did read that you could read them separately because it's from each of the guys' perspectives, and so I did pick this one up. I loved every second of it, and because of that, I got the first one for Christmas. The next one on my list is one that it wasn't the first of his books that I read. I actually read a different one first, but I enjoyed this one more, and it really opened my eyes to horror and thriller and all of these things, and that is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. So this book I read after I read Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and I really liked a Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I really, really did, but this one I enjoyed this one more. It had more humor, it had more, I don't know, it was just more entertaining for me. And so this follows Abby and Gretchen have been friends their entire lives. After an evening out with a couple of friends, Gretchen ends up coming back a little weird. You find out later that she's possessed, and it is up to Abby to try to get her unpossessed. Grady Hendrix has a way of taking horror books and creeping you out completely, but also making you laugh. It's great. It's also a really great story about friendship and how friendship affects you and how friendship can change you, and how it can help you and support you, and how important love from a friend is. If Southern Book Club's Guide didn't turn me on to Grady Hendrix, this one definitely would have. So then the next book I've also raved about, and that's The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. This was phenomenal. Follows Clara, who is an Everwitch, and which means that she can control magic in all of the seasons, because in this universe, their magic is more powerful in a specific season, so spring, summer, fall, or winter. And an Everwitch only comes around every couple centuries, and so Clara shows up, she's an Everwitch, she's working on being trained to control her powers because she's afraid to use them for several reasons. She is struggling to use them, she's struggling to control them, she's struggling to figure it out. And she has pushed everybody away and lives a very secluded kind of life, even though she's at school with a bunch of other witches. And so throughout the course of this, she meets Sang, who is at the school working in the greenhouses and working on his magic that way because he's a spring. And so he ends up being tapped to help train her. And so the two of them grow close, they grow a friendship, they actually bloom a relationship, and then she freaks out. And so there's reasons for that. Her reasons behind pushing people away and keeping people away are justified and understandable. And you feel for her, you really do. And so this is a fantastic book. It is beautifully written. It is really unique to its own little genre. Rachel is completely beautiful in her writing. I really also liked Wild as the Witch, but this one, I just liked this one better. And I don't know why exactly. It was just beautifully written, and you connected to the characters in a way I haven't done before. And so this was amazing, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. I'm so glad so many people recommended it to me, and I highly recommend it to you as well. So the next book on my list is one that I listened to on audio, but now I own the physical copy, and that is The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels. I have never laughed so hard at a book, I don't think. This is just a conundrum. This entire book is a riddle wrapped inside of an enigma wrapped inside of a taco. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. It follows Cecilia Bassingthwaite, and she's the ideal Victorian lady, but she's also a thief. Like the other members of the Wisteria Society, crime sorority, she flies around England drinking tea, blackmailing friends, and acquiring treasure by interesting means. Sure, she has a dark and traumatic past and an overbearing aunt, but all things considered, it's a pleasant existence. Until the men show up. Ned Lightbourne is a sometimes assassin who is smitten with Cecilia from the moment they meet. Unfortunately, that happens while he's under direct orders to kill her. His employer, Captain Morvath, who possesses a Gothic abbey bristling with cannons and an unbridled hate for the world, intends to rid England of all of its presumptuous women, starting with the Wisteria Society. Ned has plans of his own, but both men have made one grave mistake: never underestimate a woman. When Morvath imperils the Wisteria Society, Cecilia is forced to team up with her handsome would-be assassin to save the woman who raised her, hopefully proving once and for all that she's as much of a scoundrel as the rest of them. So this book is very charming, it is very clever, it is very funny. What would make me laugh was these moments of they were being perfectly ladylike, and then it's like, well, you always carry a knife in your, in your pantyhose or in your sock, or, and so it was just funny. The romance that builds in this is really, really cute because she wants nothing to do with Ned. Well, she's convinced she wants nothing to do with Ned, but then she falls for him, and it's, even when they get together, it's hysterical. There's just, this book is just cute and whimsical and funny. And there is a sequel, and then there is another one coming out in 2023, which I am so excited for, because they are just so lighthearted and funny and completely just weird, because their houses fly, they have cannons, they have all of these things. It's really, really good, and I highly suggest it. And then I highly suggest A League of Gentlewomen Witches, which is the sequel to this one. And then I'm very much looking forward to the new one that is coming out. They're all by Holton, and they are all very funny. So the next book I don't have a physical copy of. A friend of mine is borrowing it, and that is The Dead Romantics. I loved this book, and it is written by Ashley Poston. This book was so good and so creative and unlike anything I've read before. And it really did have you wondering how this was all gonna work out. So it follows Florence, who's a ghostwriter for a really well-known author. Well, the publisher ends up with a new editor, and he's really, really handsome, but he's really kind of mean. And she asks for an extension and he says no, but she's struggling with writing romance because she had a really bad breakup. And so she's not in the mood, she doesn't want to, she thinks love is dead. Like, there's this whole thing about it. Something that is unknown to people is that Florence's family runs a funeral parlor, and when her dad suddenly dies, she's forced to go home. And she hasn't been home in like a decade. But she hasn't been home because she can see ghosts. Also, she helped solve a murder by the help using a ghost. And so her history at home is not good. She doesn't want to be there. But when her dad dies, she's forced to go. And then one night she's at the funeral parlor and there's a knock on the door, and she opens it and it's her editor, but her editor is dead. And so you have to kind of figure out what happened to him. She's trying to explain what happened to him, and she ends up falling for him and he falls for her. So then it just becomes this, okay, what are they gonna do about that? It's very cute. It is very well written. It was a beautiful story. People are hesitant to read it because he's dead, she's alive, how does that work? But trust me, it works. And I highly suggest you read it. It is by far one of my favorite reads of the year. It roped me from the beginning, and I've recommended it to anybody that will listen to me spiel about it. My friend Deb has read it, my aunt has read it, and I will continue to force this book on people forever. So the next book I have for you, I don't have the physical copy of because I listened to it, which was how it was recommended to me, which is how I will recommend it to you. It's Daisy Jones and the Six. I've heard that it is hard to read the physical copy of this book because it is like reading an interview, but when you listen to the book, it is a full cast of characters. It ropes you in from the beginning, and it is just fantastic. It is written by Taylor Jenkins Reid, who I am a huge fan of. I have loved everything that I have read by her, and it is a story about Daisy Jones, who is a struggling musician and a drug addict and all of these things. she joins up with the Six and their lead singer, writer, Billy Dunn. They end up teaming up together because the Six is rising. Billy Dunn and the Six, Billy and the Six is coming up to stardom in the rock music industry. And then they're trying to find a new vibe, a new type of music. And so they bring in Daisy, and she's wonderful and she's exactly what they need. And they just hit the mark, and they end up on top of the world until they're no longer on top of the world. And so there is a interesting dynamic between Daisy and Billy. It's really like a rock band from the 70s, and the sex and the drugs and the rock and roll and all of that kind of stuff. And so there is an interesting little relationship between Billy and Daisy, but Billy is married to Camilla. And so it's really like listening to an interview about what happened to Daisy Jones and the Six, how they got their start and then how they fizzled out. And there's a twist at the end that you're just like, oh, and it's great. I highly recommend the audiobook for sure, because it is an entire cast of characters and you actually get to hear the music they're singing. And it's also about to be an Amazon Prime show or a Netflix show. I can't remember, but I'm so excited to watch it because it was just wonderful. This book was wonderful. And it led me to really enjoy audiobooks. And it's hard to explain. I just really loved this book because I'm also a big fan of like Fleetwood Mac and all those rock bands from the 70s because of my dad. And so it was really interesting to listen to this story and kind of feel that. Like, I felt like I was transferred back and I was listening to an interview or reading a book or watching a documentary about this band that actually existed. And you could actually Google, does Daisy Jones and the Six actually exist? Because people thought they were a real band. Because Taylor Jenkins Reid created them in such a way that they seem real. They seem larger than life, and it's great, and I highly recommend it. Another book I read this year that I absolutely fell in love with was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. This book was hysterical. So it's kind of got a historical fiction vibe, and it's definitely got a feminist girl power vibe. It's wonderful. So it's about a chemist, a female chemist, Elizabeth. And it is quite literally the 1950s, where everybody thinks that women should just be at home with their feet up, you know? And so she's a chemist and she's not making headway at work because she's a woman. She's not getting promoted, but she ends up falling for another chemist, and she refuses to marry him because she doesn't want to be associated, like to be said that she's doctor, she's Mrs. Doctor, whatever, you know, like, so she doesn't want to be the female to the male, you know, like she just wants her own name. She wants her own place in science. She wants her own place in chemistry, and she doesn't want to be riding the coattails of a man. And so even though she loves him, she won't marry him, but she does end up pregnant. And so you're watching her raise this girl, this little girl, turning her into this feminist, and this women are smart, you know, that why do men think we're dumb? Elizabeth ends up being the star of a cooking show called Supper at 6, and what they really wanted her to do was be a housewife and make supper at 6 and show women how to make recipes in her little, you know, high heels with her curled hair and everything like that. But she definitely did not fall for that. She did not fit that role, and so she refused to do it that way. And so instead, Supper at 6 is a bunch of chemistry, and it is how the different things you use to make a meal and how they react together and how it works out. And she ends up being a hit. She ends up being a star, and moms all over the world watch her because not only is she teaching them how to cook, but she's changing the status quo. She's telling women that it is okay to be different. It is okay to want to be more than just a housewife. And so she's sitting here on this show and she's calling all of the ingredients by their chemical formulas, and becomes really well known. She becomes really famous, and all of these women just flock and they love her, and they're quicker to stand up for themselves. They're quicker to do all of these things now. And it's because this woman is leading the charge. And it is a funny book. It's hysterical. It's bright. It's charming. It's funny. It just makes you kind of go, woman. I loved every second of it, and I am so glad that I read it. I really am. So then the next books I have for you are a duology, and it's because I couldn't pick just one. I'm presenting you with Vicious and Vengeful. It is a duology. It is written by V.E. Schwab, and it's nothing like I've ever read before. So it follows Victor and Eli, who are friends to begin with, and they're in college together, and Victor has decided to do some research and to do a study on near-death experiences and what can happen during near-death experiences. And a lot of times when someone has a near-death experience, they could develop extraordinary abilities. So a near-death experience is equal to having extraordinary abilities. And so that's the study. And so things turn rough when Eli, who's supposed to be, his partner, ends up not being such a nice guy and puts Victor in prison. And so Victor has to get out of prison. Victor's trying to gets out of prison, and he tries to find Eli, and it just kind of goes from there. And it's the thesis that they're working on, and it's also becomes real life for them. So it follows Victor and Eli and their stories, but it also does a back and forth. So you're looking at like last fall, this fall, 2 days ago, 5 days ago. So you're kind of all over the map, but it is done in such a great way that it is easy to understand. And you can also understand why Victor and Eli no longer like each other. So this actually has a really cute found family too. Victor ends up bringing along a little girl who ends up helping him in the long run, and along with someone that helped him break out of jail. And so they have their little found family going on. And then this one picks up where this one left off. You're following Victor again. It's really hard to explain, and it's fun, it's fast-paced, it's everything you could ask for in like, who's the superhero? Who's the hero? Who's the villain? Who lives? Who dies? Who gets powers? Who doesn't? What powers do they get? What extraordinary abilities do they get? You really think that Victor is supposed to be the villain and Eli is supposed to be the hero, but is that true? Like, who knows? It's a story and figuring out who you really are and what that means for you and for everybody else. So the next books I have for you, I read on my Kindle. So they're House of Earth and Blood and House of Sky and Breath, both by Sarah J. Maas. I love Sarah J. Maas. I am about halfway through the Throne of Glass series, working my way through that. I've read all of A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I've read these 2 Crescent City books. And these 2 Crescent City books are by far like some of my favorites. And it is just this world building story. She's so detailed. She really makes you love the characters. You're following Bryce, who lost her best friend in one of the worst ways possible. The accused ends up behind bars, but then everything kind of starts up again. And so there's obviously something not right. Something wasn't done right. So she ends up teaming up with Hunt, who is a fallen angel and is enslaved to the city basically, and is like kind of like a cop in some ways. So she teams up with him. Was kind of forced to team up with him, and they have to work on solving these crimes because she is a part of it, because she was hurt by this thing that killed her best friend. All of her best friends. They killed everybody. You're digging into this story. You're finding out interesting things about Bryce, you're finding out interesting things about Hunt, you're finding interesting things about her best friend. These 2 books are extremely hard to explain, and there's a lot of detail, there's a lot of world building, but it wraps you up in it. I couldn't put it down for the longest time. So then when I got the second one, I couldn't put that down either. And it's hard for me to say which one is better than the other, because they both are great for their own reasons. Like House of Earth and Blood sets up the story, introduces you to all the characters, and then House of Sky and Breath changes everything, and so it's just these great stories that are exactly what I want from a Sarah J. Maas book. And so I highly suggest picking these up. But if you're going to pick these up, I highly suggest reading A Court of Thorns and Roses first. Just do that, please. It's a great story. It's great stories. There's more to come. I'm very excited, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm excited to see where it all comes out. I'm excited to know what happens to all the characters, because let me tell you, the cliffhanger that Sarah J. Maas left these books on makes me hate her just a little bit. But not enough to stop reading her stuff. Let's be honest there. So that is the end of this video. That is all I have for you. Those are my top 10 books of the year. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Are there books that you have read that you've highly enjoyed this year? Are there books that I've read and you've read and you agree with me? Are there books I've read and you disagree with me? Let me know. Comment down below. Chat with me a little bit. I'm up for a healthy debate, always. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you see. I will have more content coming for sure. I have lots of fun plans for 2023, and I'm hoping to bring you all along with me. As always, I hope you live and love and read lots and lots of books, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!